Call the House Stream Committee meeting back to order to reconvene. Okay, the Chair recognizes Mr. Dabney.
Yes, yes, sir, thank you. I believe at this point, I feel good with what we've done so far, and I thought we passed a really good amendment during this process, but I believe it's time at this point to just go ahead and pull the rest of these amendments, sir.
Okay. Okay, Chair, Mr. Dabney wishes to withdraw his amendments at this time. And now we are now on to, at the point of basically debate of the bill. The opponents get 1 hour, the per opponents get an hour. You don't have to take up to an hour, but each person has got, I think it's 10 minutes per person for or against. Okay, so we'll get started with the opponents of the bill. Opponents, we got opponents. Let's go to opponents, okay. Anyone in opposition to the bill? Can be heard now? Ms. McGarry?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you all for being here, and thank you, Mr. Dabney, for pulling the rest of that pile. You've done well, you really have. I appreciate everything that you've done for us. I just want to say, many of you have heard that I am against this. I'm sure you've heard that. I'm not against what many stand for, and I understand the need for, or what people want this for, as far as medical is concerned, in the need of end-of-life care possibly. But I also want to say that I agree with the American Medical Association and the AAMA that there needs to be more testing and more guidance on this before it can be actually a prescription drug, in my opinion. So with that being said, I also want you to know that I come from a law enforcement family, and my husband and my son have made arrests on marijuana, and I know that that's recreational. I'm not saying that it's not, but it is a drug, and it is a street drug at this point in time. I also know from personal experience with my brother that it's a gateway drug. He's in prison for dealing every drug known to man, but he started out with marijuana. He's been in prison most of his adult life. It's not an easy road for my family to understand that, and for the families that he's affected throughout his life. How many, I have no idea. So this is a personal thing for me, but it's also a law enforcement issue for me. We've seen a lot of things happen over the years, but I also understand these people that have children with epilepsy, and I've seen it actually help those people. I understand both sides of this. But again, I come from the medical field. I know what the AMA says. I know what the AAMA says. I'm in the political field now. To me, this is political. It's not, it's more of a emotional, political fight, and it doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right, and I feel bad that this is where we're at. So with that being said, and we can't, I don't know, I feel bad. So I just want you all to know and to thank you all for listening to my side and understanding my side, and thank you all, and let's see what we got. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gary. Anyone else? Mr. McKay?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got constituents on both sides of this issue, and I'd like to explain my vote on this today. I'm opposed to this particular bill. I'm not opposed to medical marijuana in each and every case. I think that there are cases where medical marijuana is probably appropriate. For instance, someone facing terminal cancer or severe epilepsy, at that point, why do we really even care if they find relief in medical marijuana? Then I don't have a problem with that, and I think the law should probably permit that. But I do have some concerns with this bill. And one is, I know I tend to be a little quirky about the free market stuff if you watch my votes, but I think this bill does something that is not good, and one is limits to 15 cultivation center licenses. In my year and a half serving in the House, I realized that many times the bills that are presented to the House have nothing to do with the benefit of the citizens or the consumers. Many of these bills that are presented to protect the market or the business interest of the people who are here asking us for help, whether it be professionals, whether it be businesses. Many of the bills are under a guise for the benefit of the consumer, when they're really for the benefit of the people who's making money. And let's be clear, limiting this to 15 growers is going to make 15 growers incredibly rich. If we're going to do this bill, then it needs to be a true free market bill, and there needs to be more than 15 cultivation center licenses. There's 30 processing facilities permitted under this bill, and you know, some people are going to get very wealthy on this bill as is currently drafted. So I have a real objection to the limitation on the growers, because I think the 15 and 30 probably have a pretty good idea who they are. The other thing is really a problem that has nothing to do with medical marijuana or even opioids. A lot of the proponents of this bill have proffered that marijuana is a solution to the opioid problem. And the opioid problem is not going away by passing this bill. And I think if we tell ourselves that it is, that we're really kidding ourselves. And I don't want to be judgmental in what I'm about to say, because I'm as guilty, and many of us are, but the real problem is that Americans want a chemical to solve every single problem they have. If our kid's not making good grades in school, we want to give them a chemical. Again, I'm not judging. There may be cases where these things are appropriate, but we want to give them a chemical. We want to give them a drug. When a kid is not behaving well, we want to give them a chemical or we want to give them a drug. When people can't cope with their coworkers, what do they want to do? They want a magic pill that's going to change everything. And understand, I'm not judging. I'm as guilty of a lot of these things as anyone else, but medical marijuana isn't going to change people's lives. Now, if someone has a health problem, again, you're terminal, you're in pain, I'm fine with you having medical marijuana. But what we're going to see is an explosion of people using medical marijuana as a psychotropic drug, and it's not a psychotropic drug, okay? So I have some concerns about this bill. For that reason, the grounds for using it are pretty broad, and people are going to be using this for social anxiety disorder and everything else. And I don't think using marijuana, using an opioid, using alcohol is an appropriate solution for most psychiatric disorders. So I think we need to be concerned about that. And let me give you a few statistics that I think that bear this out. In 2008, 10% of adults were using psychotropic drugs. In 2016, that number's increased to almost 16%. Here's the alarming statistic on this, because college students, 17% of college students are taking psychotropic drugs today. as of 2021, 17%. We've got a bigger problem, bigger than marijuana, and my concern with this bill is that it encourages people to use marijuana to deal with their problems. And so while I support using medical, I don't have a problem with people using medical marijuana in certain situations dealing with pain management, severe epileptic seizures, and things of that nature. I think going down the road that we allow people to vape marijuana to deal with their mental health issues might be a road that needs a little more consideration, and that we should narrow this bill for that reason. So for those reasons primarily, I intend to vote against this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other opponents? Mr. Dabney, opponents? Mr. Dabney, yes, sir. Your chair recognizes Mr. Dabney.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, you know, I agree with everything that Mr. McCabe just said. Under certain severe circumstances where somebody's terminally ill, there's no doubt that they're in the end stage of their life, they're on hospice care or just something along those lines. I believe in giving them anything that makes them feel better. And it could be this, whatever it is. They're dying and they're in pain, and I think we should try to help them as best we can. My concern with this bill is, just like Mr. McCabe just said, it's too broad-based, and it also and I just lost my train of thought. So anyway, I know Miss Brawley didn't you're not amazed by that, are you? So here's my big concern with this, and I know, like Mr. Hart said, that this is the most conservative bill of its type in the nation, and I believe that. And I believe he also, Mr. Hart said this today, and I heard Mr. Hill say it the other day. This has been worked on for 8 years, and I know the Senate's worked hard on this, but my concern is across the nation, wherever these bills have passed, a lot of problems develop. I've got a friend that lives in Washington State, and he called me a few weeks ago. We were just chit-chatting. I haven't talked to him in a long time. And I said, hey, you guys have medical marijuana out there in Washington. How did that work out for you? And he said, it's terrible. His exact quote was, it's ruined our state. Unemployment's gone up. Homelessness has gone up. Crime. He said people just laying around, on the streets and sidewalks, he said, just stoned all the time. And I know that it probably didn't start out that way because, good intentions, but just like this bill has good intentions. But I'm afraid that the history of these types of bills across the country has not been good. Even though our bill might be the best, we're dealing with something that it's an industry is what we're dealing with. And whenever money's involved and people are going to be making lots of money, bad things are going to happen. So also I've heard, some of the things I've heard this week is, marijuana is harmless. It's not harmless. It leads to lots of problems, just like drinking, alcohol does. It leads to lots of problems, and lives are ruined in a lot of cases, or people are killed in lots of cases. Even with marijuana, driving under the influence, or just having an accident that you would not have ordinarily had if you weren't on this marijuana. It's not a harmless drug. People said, well, it's a plant. It grows naturally. It's organic. And they would say that. I heard that mentioned many times this week, as if it was totally harmless. Well, poison ivy is an organic plant, and I'm not going to chew it or smoke it or rub it all over me, because mushrooms are organic and natural. There are mushrooms that grow along the woods where I like to go hiking that I won't even touch. If you touch them, some of them are so poisonous, you can lose your mind right there on the spot. And it's a beautiful little plant or fungus. Just like, but so marijuana is not an innocent plant that's just growing wild out there that's not going to hurt anybody. It can hurt, and it can destroy lives. And for all the reasons that were previously stated, of course, I'm also going to vote against this. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any more opponents to speak on the bill? Okay, here and now, we'll go to the proponents. We have up to 1 hour, each person's 10 minutes, and no one shall speak more than twice. More than once, okay. All right, more than once, okay. Hearing Mr. Gilliard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Of course, being on the pro side of this, I want everybody to understand, and I respectfully disagree with some statements from some of the representatives here, because I could use the analogy in speaking to, why this is bad. I can tell you why some things are good. When you look at a rattlesnake, if it bites you, sure. If you don't get treatment, you'll die. But guess, and thank God for modern day technology, we can now use the venom from rattlesnake and cure diseases and many other things. So, it's always two sides to an issue. Now, speaking to the recreational marijuana, because I know we get this confused, and we have many times in discussing this. It reminds me of the days of Prohibition, when the government decided to do something bold. They legalized alcohol. In other words, they took the monies out of the hands of the underworld and decided to tax it and make good use of that money and put a lot of moonshiners out of business. It's an old saying that goes like this: not everything that is challenged can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is challenged. I always tell people, when you look at the state of South Carolina, we're always last in the things that are first, and first in the things that are last. Now, 37 some odd states cannot be wrong. But, in closing, because I don't want to take, we've been here long enough with this, if it's going to help children, I say do it. If it's going to help curing pains of some of your own fellow veterans. We've heard the pleas, Monday gone. There was more veterans in this room than anything, and I was sort of taken by that. If it's going to help them, I say do it. We're very patriotic here in the state of South Carolina, and we need to practice what we preach. In being from Charleston County, it's a young lady, and I'd be remiss not to mention her names because she was a true champion in all this. Jill Swing, I want to commend her on her fortitude, her patience, going throughout the state telling a story about her daughter. I want to commend her. She deserves some accolades from all of this. And I'll be the first to tell anybody that. She can write a book about her experience on bringing this to the forefront. But I also want to thank the staff for their patience and my leader, Mr. Leon Howard. And you couldn't find a better lawyer, Mr. Hart, who's one of my favorites up here. I love the way you articulate it through all this, because you talk to the lay person, and that's what I like about you. You don't talk over people's heads. So I want to commend you on that, okay? And that's me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Okay, anyone else? Ms. Brawley? Ms. Brawley, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will be brief. I want to thank you, Mr. Dabney, for your amendments, but I want to thank you even more for pulling down the remaining ones that you did. As Ms. Robinson so ably pointed out, we did approve one of your amendments, and I think it was an important one for us to approve to alert folks who might be allergic to some of the things that might be in the cannabis. This is a tough issue for all of us. Some of us started on one side of the fence and we ended up on the other. But ultimately, for me, it was about helping people. And anytime as a legislative body, we can do something to help people, we ought to give that every consideration. And I can tell you about a year or so ago when we were looking at Narcan, and this committee was deciding how it was going to be allowed to be permitted to be used by people who were not professionals. I had a lot of trepidation about that because I could see more people maybe taking opioids and taking other kinds of drugs reliant upon someone being there with Narcan to bring them back. But we approved it anyway because we were in the business of trying to save lives. And I think this particular bill is not only going to help a lot of people, we heard from them this week, but it's about more than that. It's about helping young children who can't speak for themselves, but for their parents who have watched them suffer year after year, looking for a remedy that we can provide. I think we should do this. And contrary to what many people may believe, this is not haphazardly done. The ability to get medical cannabis is specifically prescribed to certain types of illnesses. You can't just say, I need it, and get it. And I think that's really responsible for us to have those distinctions so that we don't have people who are using this bill to create recreational use of marijuana. So I know this was tough for a lot of us, but again, we have the ability to help people. And we have to be reliant upon them to follow the law as we have, if we pass this bill as we have indicated it should be. And if we find that people are abusing the law, we have the ability to correct that. But I think to not hear the pleas of the people that we've heard here this week and last week and not have any sympathy for them would be heartless and irresponsible. So I would hope that all of us here today could feel comfortable in our own well-being to know that this is the right thing to do and to approve this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Brawley. Mr. Tedder, and then Representative Kimberly Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out for the record that I am for this bill for a number of reasons. As we've stated, I think we have to, while we heard some stories of how people believe that marijuana is a gateway drug and marijuana causes people to do illegal things, we must be reminded that majority, if not all of those stories, were dealing with recreational marijuana. And the difference is what we're doing here is making a product that's safe, that's determined by the medical professionals that we already trust to prescribe us opioids and pain relievers. And so I'd much rather have people having access to safe use of medical marijuana than having them go out and try to go to another state or illegally obtain marijuana, recreational marijuana, or street marijuana, as some may call it, from the underground industry. And the reason that is because if you haven't been paying attention a lot recently, people are lacing things. They're lacing marijuana with fentanyl. People are dying because they want access to marijuana. But when we have an opportunity to provide them with something that is safe and we know it's not laced and we know what's in it exactly because we trust our medical professionals, I think that's a good step. And no, I do agree with you, Mr. McCabe, that by passing this, it's not going to solve the opioid epidemic. People will still abuse opioids. People will still be prescribed opioids. However, in hearing some of the testimony from people and how, medical marijuana can help wean people off of opioids. And if we can save just a couple of people, I think that this is a bill worth passing. Because one thing is an absolute, is that by not passing this bill, we certainly won't solve the opioid epidemic. And again, this is the most restrictive conservative bill in the country. And I think that's for a reason, because we do want it to be safe. We want it to be regulated as it should be. But to those points, that's the reason I support this. And I think that it will save some lives and help people to wean off of opioids and let us not go on and particularly with things like Adderall, it's so easily accessible. You can just say you have, you can't pay attention, and almost everybody's prescribed Adderall, and I think that's a gateway drug to cocaine. But nonetheless, this will be regulated, and this will be a safe product because we will trust our medical professionals to do so. And that being said, I support this bill, and I hope that my colleagues can support this to help those that need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Kimberly Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say it has been a privilege to serve on this committee under your leadership, Chairman Howard.
Thank you.
I appreciate the hard work of the staff. Mr. Dabney, I appreciate your efforts. I just want to say that this has been probably the most difficult vote I've taken this term. As a freshman legislator, I often laugh because I hear people say this bill has been being worked on for about 8 years. It probably could have passed sooner if my dad, who's a senator, hadn't had such a problem with it, but he voted against this bill, and I believe, we've talked about it, I believe this is the first piece of legislation that we have not been on the same page. I understand his side of it, and he understands mine. And what's important to me is that as a veteran, oftentimes when I don't even have an appointment at the VA, but when I'm traveling here, because I go home every day, when I'm traveling here or when I'm going back to Manning, I like to stop in at the VA. And sometimes I sit in the waiting rooms, and the things that I hear the veterans discuss that they're here to be treated for. I've seen missing limbs and veterans be service connected at 10%, but they have a bag, a plastic grocery bag of about 8 to 10 prescription medications. And I hear people pass that are visiting, and they say, "Thank you for your service." And my colleague and mentor, Mr. Hart, worded it perfectly this week when he said, "We're always telling veterans, thank you for your service." But I believe that talk needs to be matched by the walk. And I sit here and I say it's difficult because I hear the other side of it, but I just can't think that there's a child having numerous seizures. I can't think that there's a cancer patient near the end of life. I can't think that there's a veteran with some of these prescriptions that I've seen with my own eyes that they have been given. I cannot sit here and think that there's something like medicinal marijuana that can help them, and it's within my means to at least offer them the opportunity, and I not take it. And so this wasn't political for me because people told me, think about what this could mean for you as a freshman legislator as it relates to reelection. And I have opposition, but this vote, I did not consider the political side of it. I was elected to serve the constituents the best I could in this term. I was not elected to do anything to bring me back another term or to send me home or what have you. And I'd also like to conclude by thanking Jared from the Sheriff's Association, because I heard from you when I didn't hear from a lot of sheriffs. And when I heard from some, they were just saying, hey, either way, I could go either way on this. And so thank you for the phone calls. Thank you for the statistics and the facts that you shared with me. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. The chair recognizes Representative Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In conjunction with everyone else, I also want to thank this committee. I think we've done a very good job of vetting this bill. We've acted with decorum and respect, and we've taken the time that is necessary to hear testimony from many. And I echo the sentiments of Representative Kim Johnson with the veteran, in regards to veterans issues. I think for me, that is the place where I most hear the talk about this. And while it is not the end all be all, it is a great opportunity for us to add another tool to our tool belt when it comes to dealing with managing pain and mental health issues. And like so many have said before me, I support this bill because it is a choice. It is an option. Just like we have folks that want to choose other things for COVID-19, this gives them another tool that they can use. And so I am definitely in support of this bill. I think it is past time, and I think this body and this state is ready for it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Matthews. The chair now recognizes Representative Jermaine Johnson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Well, first off, I do want to start off by thanking everybody here as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for leading this effort here, and us. I think we did a great job vetting, listening to all the testimony, listening to what people had to say, and hearing concerns. I've spoken to a lot of individuals about this. And even though I was questioning a lot of people when they were coming up here during the testimony time, I did hear what people had to say, and one of the things that I must say is, listen to Mr. McCabe speak. I mean, he makes 100% sense on that, on what he was talking about, and with having 15, how many of those 15 are going to be people of color or minorities? Or women owned. How many of these 15 are going to have access to, these rural communities or these people who are going to do this is going to be potentially, these are going to make millionaires or billionaires, here in this state. And how many of them are going to be individuals who just don't have, the resources or whatever or what have you. So, I do have concerns also, along with Mr. McCabe. I think that, we're always trying to put a pill in somebody. We're always trying to do something like that. We're always trying to take away the pain or figure out how to deal with it, have some coping skills. But we do have an opportunity to provide people with some sort of relief. And I feel so much better because I have experience. I know individuals from my community, people I grew up with, who smoked laced marijuana to try to cope with an issue. And they were never right after that. And I've seen people die from these situations of overdosing. 2 months ago, I lost a high school friend who overdosed on some opiates 2 months ago. And it hurt me. It hurt me because she was recovering. And after she recovered, their wall was in recovery. But after she was in her recovery, she got into a traumatic experience like a car accident. And that brought her back to taking another drug, and she overdosed. And her husband found her dead the next morning. Situations like that could be prevented. If we allow doctors, the permission to offer somebody something that won't be so lethal to people that are out here. People are dying every single day because of drugs, prescription drugs that are aimed at helping people. And I think that right now that this is an opportunity for us all to really look at what we have to offer our constituents. Now you can agree with it, you can disagree with it, but don't deny somebody else the opportunity at a quality of life because you disagree with it. So I think we must really consider, what we're doing here, and let's give people an opportunity at a good quality of life like we all want. Thank you so much.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, yes, ma'am. Ms. Robinson, yes, ma'am.
This past January, I sat for practically 2 weeks in the hospice center of the VA Center in San Francisco, California, as my own dear son lay dying from cancer. I watched him every day, and it was hard. It's still hard for me to talk about it. But it was hard for me to watch his body racked with pain each and every day. He suffered from an aggressive brain cancer, the same cancer that took out Joe Biden's son, Bo. You all may remember that. And as I watched him, he was cared for. He received beautiful care from the VA, knowing that he was going to die. And he had worked for the VA. In fact, the VA did a nationwide testimonial, a virtual testimonial on him, on his work as an advocate for veterans in the VA area of San Francisco, Oakland, California, and it was filmed all over the country for everyone to see. But I'm just thankful to God that I was out in California where he did receive the kind of help that he needed because of his ability to access the kind of medications that would ease his passage. I've sat on this 3M committee for the past 10 years. I'm retiring this year. But I often think about the people who came before us testifying, pleading for help. Some of them dragged their children in here, and we weren't able to do anything at that time. Now's the time. It may not have been the time before, but now is the time. Now's the time for us to make a positive vote that will impact the lives of little children suffering from epilepsy, from veterans like my son who are not out in California to get care, but are right here in South Carolina. Now's the time for us to move forward. So I will definitely be voting for this bill. There may be some things in it that need tweaking and whatever. We'll deal with that later. No bill that I've seen come out of this medical-related committee has ever been perfect, but it's a start. So I will be voting for it, and I want to thank everyone who participated in this process and helping us to better understand what we're up against. Mr. Dabney, I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone who participated. But I will definitely be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Ms. Murray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the staff. Thank you, Mr. Dabney. And at first, I was undecided about the bill, but since it's going to help with the veterans and children, I support this bill. And I just want to echo what Jermaine said. Hopefully, we can have more minorities in the industry. And it's been a long time. So I just want to say that. Thank you. And I'm glad that I'm part of the 3M committee. Thank you, Mr. Hart and Wendy, for what y'all doing too, also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill and Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I hadn't planned on saying anything. I'm going to save most of my comments for the House floor, but I do think that it's important for the public who may be watching today to know that this is not a partisan issue. This has bipartisan support and also has bipartisan opposition. This is an issue where, we're going to go out on the House floor and we're going to debate it. And as we've had this discussion here today and last week, the thing that I keep hearing come up from folks concerned about this bill is I'm afraid. I keep hearing I'm afraid. I'm afraid. I'm scared. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of South Carolina looking like something I don't want it to look like. I'm afraid of problems. I'm afraid of consequences. I'm afraid of these things. And I would just challenge you to just open your eyes, open your ears, and listen to the patients in your districts. And just imagine for a moment how much more afraid they must be when it is literally a choice of life or death for them. And ask yourself, why are you here if it's not to do right by them? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for seeing us through this. This has been a long time coming.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Chair recognizes Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, my colleagues today. This has, and I've got to say, I agree with people on both sides. Ultimately, I mean, we have a heart for getting people access to care, for opening up the market, and I took Mr. McCabe, some of his comments there. I mean, great points about the limitations on the growers, and I think there's going to be a maximum of 5 labs for testing these products, that kind of stuff. But this is, we've heard a lot of testimony recently, but this is, as it's been said, it's been going on for 8 years. That this has been vetted. There's been deliberation on this for a very long time. When I first ran for this position, I'll never forget a lot of the veterans, when I went to their door, they would ask me about the Compassionate Care Act. That was one of their most important things. Would I support the Compassionate Care Act? watching, and I think personally, we've all seen these situations too, kids with epilepsy. We've seen people with MS, these kind of things. People leaving South Carolina trying to, in the past, trying to find medical treatment. And I mean, for me at least, my eyes were open to this, a lot, especially recently during the COVID pandemic, when people were looking for care. And you had government officials saying, do this, trying to restrict people from doing certain things. And you had doctors out there that were having success with a lot of treatments. It's not up to the government to dictate your health care. This is getting government out of health care. And I'll say this too, with every medicine, with every drug, I mean, there are risks. There are definitely risks. But there's also benefits. And I think the limitations, the guardrails that have been put in place in this bill, I mean, we have the most restrictive bill in the country. We've got basically 12 qualifying conditions. A lot of states have 22 plus. This is very, very limiting. This is a responsible way to do this. One of the quotes that's been going through my mind throughout this situation is Thomas Jefferson once said that he would rather be exposed to the inconveniences of attaining too much liberty than those attaining too small a degree of it. And that's what I'm thinking about right now. I hope we're going to open this up to people in this state so that they can have more medical freedom. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else other than Mr. Hart? Okay. Chair now recognize Mr. Hart as a proponent. Thank you. Go right ahead, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the subcommittee chair who's been over this legislation for the past 8 years, I do want to thank the members of the committee and the staff for their hard work that we've gone through over the past 8 years. It's been very trying, it's been very emotional, it's been very tough. We have ups, we've had downs. And I've been here since 2006, and I chose, it was my prerogative to stay on this committee since 2006. I've had a chance to go to other committees. I've had a chance to be on Ways and Means if I had chose to. But I chose to stay here on this committee because of legislation like this and the way that we affect lives of thousands of people in South Carolina. This is one of the most restrictive bills of all the states in the country. Right now, we're only one of 4 states in the country without any form of marijuana legislation, particularly medical marijuana. I say that because South Carolina has a long history of always being last to choose to do something progressive. And I also say that because we have a sordid history of choosing not to get in front of things progressive. Over the past years, we've heard from the family members and some of our newer members who wasn't here. You've seen some of those children come in here. Little kids with the bravery and the hearts of a lion to stand on that podium and look us in the eye and say, look, I need help. I need something to stop these seizures. One of the young men that came in early this week, Monday, he had a hood on over his head. He sat back the whole entire time. When he first started coming, he needed assistance from his mother to get to that podium. What you saw on Monday was he walked to that podium by himself. When he first came, he couldn't read any of his testimony alone. He needed the assistance of his mother. But on Monday, he did it by himself. Representative Gilliard's constituent, that lady relentlessly has come up here every single year for her daughter. Every year. Every year she's come up here. And I don't believe in my heart that she has come up here so her daughter can overdose on marijuana, have it be a gateway drug to another drug, which leads me to my next point. I don't understand the gateway analysis. And here's what I don't understand about the gateway analysis. It's a gateway to what? What drug? Because all the other drugs are currently out there now. People are doing those drugs now, and we don't have this legislation. So I'm confused by the gateway analysis because I'm thinking, what is it going to be a gateway to? And if we don't have this legislation, what is the gateway now? What's leading them to those drugs? One of the worst forms of substance that we can have right now is nicotine. You don't have commercials on TV anymore for cigarettes. Pharmacies have taken cigarettes out of the store. Walmart is suited to take cigarettes out of their stores. Cigarettes is one of the worst substances that you can ingest into your body. Lastly, I have to stand up for our veterans. And I say that because I'm a veteran myself. I currently have an impairment rating for PTSD. I don't plan to, if this passes, I don't plan to partake in the medical marijuana. I don't feel that I need it. I don't feel that I'm at that point, but there are some that need it. The young man who sat here for over 5-6 hours, he sat on the front row on Monday. He sat there patiently, and he got here in the very beginning. He didn't get a chance to speak until the end, but he came up and he spoke. That tells me he's committed to getting better, to feeling better. He didn't want to get high. He didn't want to just smoke marijuana. He wouldn't not have sat there for hours just to say, please pass this legislation. So with that, I remember one piece of testimony that really stuck out to me. And here's what I say about the PTSD. A couple years ago, there was a gentleman, I think it was a doctor from the upper state. Okay. And he came and he said, I went to Colorado and I saw a bunch of young men standing in line. They looked like they were from 18 to 24 years old, and they didn't look sick. And I had no intentions of asking him any questions, and one of the questions I asked him was, how does a sick person look? How does a person with PTSD look? You can't tell if a person has PTSD. You can't tell what's going on with somebody's body. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would call for the vote to move this legislation S150 to the full House floor favorable.
Okay, the subcommittee chair has called to move the legislation forward. We will now call the roll. Those in favor of this legislation, we will do a roll call.
Ms.
All in
Brawley?
favor?
Mr. Bustos?
Aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Mr. Dabney? Mr. Gilliard? Mr. Hart?
Aye.
Mr. Hill? Mr. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson? Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Jones? Ms. Matthews? Mr. McCabe? Ms. McGarry? Ms. Murray? Ms. Parks? Ms. Robinson? Mr. Tedder?
Aye.
The bill passes favorably, as amended.
Okay, just want to take a moment to thank the committee for years of hard work. Those individuals who are no longer here, who worked on this legislation, I want to thank them as well. I want to thank the staff who's done a great job for a long time, spent long hours in working on this legislation, hours that we don't see. Also want to thank the entire committee. Those who voted against the bill, I thank you because you are voting, in your opinion, what it's going to take to move South Carolina forward. Those who voted for the bill, I thank you for your vote because you voted in your opinion. It's what you think is going to move South Carolina forward and do the best for people. I think we all want what is best for South Carolinians, and so we may be on different pages, but at the end of the day, it's in a good effort to do what is best for the citizens of the state of South Carolina and our constituents. I just want to say thank you for being here so long on Monday and your commitment for staying here today. I want to thank all the members of the press for having interest in this legislation so that we can get information out to our constituents. And we look forward to debating this legislation on the House floor. And I won't keep any longer. I know you all trying to get out of here and do other things that's important to you. Ms. Johnson indicated to me that she's ready to go. Okay, this meeting now stands adjourned.